Hello and welcome to Green Dot Daily. Happy Wednesday. We're live every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. I'm Charlie DeSturco, and coming up on the show, we talk afternoon baseball with Sean Zerillo and get his best bets for this Wednesday slate. Nick Martin comes on to talk through the Stanley Cup Final and if you should press that panic button on the Oilers. But tonight is game 3 of the NBA Finals as the Mavericks look to defend their home floor and dig themselves out of a 2-0 deficit. So keeping that in mind, here are some of the key storylines ahead of opening tip in just over 5 hours. We've seen plenty of slow starts for both teams. The Mavericks as a whole have shot just 25% from 3 in the opening 2 games. Kyrie Irving himself has gone ghost mode, an astonishing 0 for 8 from deep, and continues to struggle offensively. But with the news that we came out yesterday about Kristaps Porzingis, we're keeping an eye on that. He is day-to-day with a torn medial retinaculum. Seems optimistic in his return, at least in some capacity, for game 3, as we welcome in Matt Moore and Jay Money to talk about this injury. We'll start with Porzingis. Matt, your boots on the ground down in Dallas. You don't have this beautiful setup. You're stuck in a hotel room right now. What are you hearing surrounding this Celtics forward's injury?
Well, first off, Charlie, great job on pronouncing whatever part of his body is injured because I haven't even attempted to pull that off. Look, talking to people, this is what's interesting. It's impossible to tell if the Celtics are hiding an injury worse than they made it sound with it being day to day, or if they're smoke screening. Joe Mazzulla doesn't say things like it's a very serious injury. If it's a very serious injury, why is he day to day? That's very confusing. Woj for ESPN reported that he's expected to at least try and play in this game. Now, something to keep in mind here is that if he can't go in game 3, I have real questions about him for the rest of the series. This is not going to be an injury that is going to get better. He's not going to feel magically way better in 2 to 5 days. So if he can't go tonight, that could put him in doubt, I think, for the rest of the series. He was walking around media availability fine. Usually when a player's got an injury, they let him out of availability because he's got to get treatment. Nope. Walking around fine, came to availability, said he's going to do whatever it takes to play. He'll die if he has to. It's just really difficult right now. I will tell you this. I think that whatever the stuff we know right now is not accurate. It's either he's way more hurt than they're letting on, and he's definitely not going to play, and he's done for the series, or he's not nearly as hurt, and it's going to be a lot better than it kind of looks like. I don't think Boston's doomed in this game or this series without him. I think they can win here in Dallas without him. And quite honestly, I'll just be very curious to see kind of what happens. I just don't think anyone should be necessarily be getting ahead of themselves with predictions on Kristaps Porzingis at this point.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Celtics 9-1 in the postseason without him. So they've proven they can win without him. It was interesting to see Dallas kind of mount some sort of comeback when he left with that injury in the second half. At least played better than we've seen, despite them not being able to hit a 3J. I mean, Porzingis in general obviously provides such a boost defensively. And you think like his absence would loom large in this series?
Yeah, I do. I do now. I agree with Matt that they don't necessarily need Porzingis to win this, to win the finals. Obviously, only have to win 2 of the next 5 games if it gets that far. But like this is paper plate Porzingis we're talking about here, man. This goes all the way back to him playing for the Mavs. This guy is always injured, and that was a lot of the reason why people didn't think that the Celtics would be able to make it. Like, oh, Porzingis, is he going to be able to last the whole season? But I do agree with Matt. If he was out for the rest of the series, I would still favor the Celtics to get it done. But for this particular game, like this is a Super Bowl spot for the Mavs here, in my opinion. But Porzingis takes the Celtics offense and defense to another level, in my opinion. I've been saying all season when they have their starting 5, this team is nearly unbeatable. This is one of the best teams we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years. So without Porzingis, and you have to rely on Al Horford a lot more, that's why the Mavs were able to make a comeback in the second half. You get a lot more lob threats towards the paint, in my opinion. Guys like Derek Jones Jr., Derek Lively, and Daniel Gafford as well. You could even throw PJ Washington there as well. So if Porzingis is limited here, which I'm sure there's some sort of leg injury, Charlie, what part of the body is there? It has to be something with the leg, right?
It's his leg. It's his leg, and that's about the most I've done as far as finding out what a retinaculum is.
Yeah, I've never heard it, but like basketball is a game that you have to run up and down the floor. So
Yeah.
honestly, if Porzingis does try to play here, I don't think he'll finish the game. Like the Mavs are going to try to push the pace in this one, try to run Porzingis off the floor. He's already 7'3", 7'4", trying to get up and down the floor. If he's not 100%, that could really mean a lot for the Mavs here. And like I say, a ton of less paint protection, because if you have Al Horford out there, I know me, I'm driving to the paint every single time, Luka or Kyrie, and dishing it off to the centers or Derrick Jones Jr. And that's where they would really find a lot of success. And that's where the Celtics would miss Porzingis in this particular game, in my opinion.
No respect for 70-year-old Al Horford, but it does make sense, right? Like Daniel Gafford played much better in the second half without Porzingis looming around the paint. He had 5 blocks in the first 2 games this series. But when we talk about Kristaps Porzingis and him, possibly being out, there's a whole grand scheme of Dallas things that have gone on and have gone wrong through the opening 2 games, right? Kyrie Irving has gone ghost mode. Dallas in general have struggled from 3. What specifically, when you look toward tonight's games, we'll start with Matt. Does Dallas need in this game to end up pulling off the, I guess not upset because they're favored, but the win?
Yeah, it's a whole smorgasbord, quite honestly. Like there's so much that they need to play better at. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily sure that they're in great position here, because there's a lot that they have to fix. I would go with 3-point attempts. You have to open the floor up with your spacing here. You're just not going to be able to get the kind of stuff. You need them questioning whether they're going to get hit with a lob or a 3. Talking to some of the Mavericks yesterday, they talked about how there were some shots that they passed up that they have to be better at. Derrick Jones Jr. said that. I'm expecting more Dante Exum minutes in this game, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be willing to take those threes. It can't just be Luka Doncic taking sidestep fadeaways over Al Horford, which he has done pretty much nonstop in this series over and over and over again, instead of taking him off the dribble. You got to keep pace with Boston, because you can get a no KP game or a bad KP game, and you can do all of these types of things. But if Boston's hitting threes and you're not, you're just going to get math to death. You've got to be able to keep pace with them. Make or miss, that's not really important. You just got to be able to take those shots to get Boston stretched. That's going to make things easier on drives. That's going to help Kyrie Irving get going. That's going to help Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford get going. They got to take a lot of threes in this game. Taking him is more important, honestly, than even making him, though making him is going to be pretty important too.
Jay, do you agree? And is there another way that Dallas has to kind of, attack this matchup with Boston?
Yeah, well, usually me and Matt don't agree, but I'm agreeing with everything he's saying. Obviously, with this, I mean, that's the Celtics, right? They're like the new age Warriors. They're going to take a ton of threes, and if they're out shooting you from 3-point land, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You have to match that intensity. You have to match their at least 3-point attempts and have to make some as well. I think Maxi Kleber is going to mean a lot in this particular game. I know he was horrible in game 2. He played 16 minutes, went 0 of 4. His points probably was at over 2.5, and he couldn't even get that. But we know that role players play a lot better at the house. So maybe they even have to throw Tim Hardaway Jr. out there as well. They need more pure 3-point shooters out there. And I do expect Maxi Kleber to have a lot better game, but I think it's all on Kyrie Irving, in my opinion. Not all on him, because we know Luka's going to do what he has to, but Kyrie has to give them something else. We know that Boston fans absolutely hate him. He was probably letting them get into his head. He's back at the house now and doesn't have those fans heckling him. I think Kyrie Irving is back with his family. He's back at home, gets the home cooking. I think he's going to feel a lot more comfortable today, in my opinion. He only had 12 points in game 1, 16 in game 2. Even though the Celtics have great defenders, Kyrie has to try to get into the paint, draw some fouls, make some threes as well, in my opinion, man. So Luka can't do everything by himself. You don't need the 1 assist Luka. You need that 11 assist Luka, getting all the guys involved in this one, so they can feel like they're actually playing in the game, and it's not just one versus everybody, in my opinion. So if I'm the Mavs, I drive to the paint, try to get some foul calls on one of the star players for the Celtics, and make them play their bench, because one thing the Celtics don't have, their bench isn't horrible, but that's where they're vulnerable, in my opinion. So if you can get a couple quick early fouls on Tatum or Brown, then that's how you can really exploit the Celtics' weak bench, in my opinion. And on the other side, Luka has to get the role players involved so that they can feel like they're playing team basketball and feed off the crowd energy, man. This team is back at the house. They're down 0-2. The Mavs hadn't really shown that they could play really well at the house, but in this spot, backs against the wall, absolute desperation spot, I think the crowd will be behind them. The Mavs fans love basketball. They love the finals. They're going to show up tonight. So that's what I think the Mavs need to do.
Yeah, I mean, Kyrie in general, right? Like, he created 14 potential assists last game. So at least the creating is starting to come along. It's such a tough defensive matchup for him. And we've talked about this plenty of times on this show, just how difficult it is altogether for him to create. But he's a tough shot maker. And I will say before we go into game 3 tonight, please stop giving me hope on Maxi Kleber being able to score more than 3 points, because I've done that the last 2 games and he scored 2 and then he didn't even make like 3 wide open threes. So let's cut this Maxi Kleber talk as we move on to tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. The Mavericks, 2.5-point favorites, over under of around 214 right now. Matt, where are you headed?
Yeah, by the way, on Kleba, his shoulder's not right. You can tell just watching him. And he had enough wrap on him to be basically, he looked like a linebacker with the amount of wrap that he had on his shoulder yesterday at availability following practice. I'm going to take the over 214.5 here. This was 212 yesterday. So we've seen like a huge amount of steam this morning on the over. I still think there's value at 214. The Mavericks have talked about a faster pace being valuable. Dante Exum was saying that they need to get into their sets a little bit quicker so there's more cross matches. The Porzingis injury will make things easier for Dallas. We talked about that, about not having to worry about Porzingis as a shot rim protector there. He's not as good Al Horford's not as good in space as a healthy Porzingis. And honestly, a Porzingis that was limited, Luka and Kyrie are both blowing by him after he suffered that injury at the end of game 2. Also, Boston opponent team total overs have gone over in 17 of 20 losses this season. That makes sense, right? Like, oh, they lost, and so the other team scored more than expected. That's not really surprising. But when there's only 20 losses, I want to kind of look at that because this seems like such a smash spot for the Mavericks. Now, I will say, I'm going to eventually bet Boston. I can't get to a point where this line seems right to me. I can't understand the Mavericks being favored at all, even without Porzingis could be sent to Mars, and I would still be like, no, the Boston Celtics should be favored here. So I can't agree with it, but the better bet I definitely think is on the over. I'm expecting better pace. I think Boston's going to shoot well because honestly, the Mavs defense has been worse at home in these playoffs. And I think Dallas is going to shoot better like Jay thinks. So I'm going to take the over 214.5, and that'll be the best bet.
Right. It makes sense in theory, right? Like the Dallas is going to make more shots eventually, and role players are going to play better at home. So with them scoring, a faster pace lends itself to an over. And we finally got to the point in the show where Matt and Jay disagree. Matt saying that he's probably going to end up on the Celtics, but Jay Money, you're all over Dallas in this one.
Yeah, and it would have made for a better segment as well, for a better show if Matt went on ahead and went with the Celtics as well.
Too cowardly.
That would have made it a whole lot better, man. But this is a Super Bowl type of spot for the Mavs here, in my opinion. I do think the script flips here. I do think that now they will play a lot better game at the house, which Matt said they hadn't been really doing so far in the playoffs. But I think the script flips here. I think that they need this home crowd as well. The Celtics are already too much for them. It's definitely too much to go up there in Boston and give them and to get a win as well. But at the house, I do think the Mavs, like I said, it's all on the role players. They feel a lot more comfortable at the house. Now Kyrie doesn't have those fans heckling him and saying all these dirty things about him and his family and things like that. So I feel like they'll feel a lot more comfortable, in my opinion. And I don't see them getting swept in this series. We've had too many really short series this far in the playoffs. I think we actually get one that goes 6 or 7 games in this NBA Finals. I do not see the Mavs going down 0-3 or getting swept in this one. Expect a little bit of a little bit of comfortability and complacency from the Celtics as well. We know they're not the strongest minded type of team as well. So I do think that they kind of come out a little bit fat and happy as well. And which, if the Mavs can get off to a great start here and things get out of hand, the Celtics will kind of just mail this one in my opinion, and say, you know what, this isn't our game. Let's get ready for game 4. Maybe they could win that one. But for this one, this very pivotal game 3, I will rock with the Mavs on the money line, -140. If you had to lay the 2.5 or 3, I like that as well. I feel like if the Mavs do win, they probably win this game by double digits. Obviously, this line opened up at +1 or -1, whichever way you saw it, and money has come in on them. That's the reason why the line is where it's at. But I do have confidence that the Mavs come out here and get a game 3 win. And personally, I don't think that it's going to be close. I think this is their rah-rah spot, and they go for their home crowd and get a home win here in game 3. I think the role players will play a lot better here, feel a lot more comfortable. Give me the Mavs tonight on the money line.
If there were ever a spot for Dallas to, strike back and land a blow, it's tonight with all the injury concerns around Kristaps Porzingis, which we'll continue to monitor. But Matt Moore, J Money, best of luck tonight, and thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Sticking to the hardwood, and here's a look at the most bet player props ahead of game 3 between Dallas and Boston. Drew Holiday's assist and rebound prop is atop the most bet list. He's been over this number in both games thus far. Jason Tatum to grab double-digit boards, also among the top 5. 99% of that money is on the over per BetMGM. He finished a rebound short of that on Sunday. And could we finally see a Kyrie Irving offensive showcase? The public seems to think so, but they did so the last few games as well. As we welcome in Brian Fonseca to the show to talk more about Game 3. Brian, I want to ask you, a little bit more about Kyrie here, because plenty of people, including you, have gone on to talk about maybe Kyrie is better suited as a facilitator, not a scorer in this series, given the defensive matchup and assignment between Jrue Holiday and Derek White, always lurking around. Is the sentiment still felt here with him returning home with his points over being one of the most bet props?
Yeah, I think, and going into this series, I didn't project him to have a great scoring series because on the other side, you have Jrue Holiday and you have Derek White.
Right.
Two of the best guards equipped to guard Kyrie Irving in one backcourt. And I projected an over in terms of assists for the series. Is over in terms of assists for the series would have been over 4.6 per game. So we'll see. I do like his assists tonight more than the points. But at some point, you would think greatness is going to be greatness. And on the offensive end, Kyrie Irving is going to hit shots. In game one, it felt a lot like he actually got to some of the shots he wanted. They were difficult, but some of the difficult shots, he does make them. He's one of the best at converting these shots for someone who's 6'3", 6'2" and under. Like, he's just elite at that and has been and still is. And he was missing those. Then in game two, it felt like he was suffocated more. He didn't have, the juice to sort of create offensively in that same way. So you do think that on the home floor, even though Dallas has been really good on the road and not awesome at home in the playoffs, but this is more of a role player game to me. Like, I think this is where role players finally hit shots. But yeah, Kyrie Irving coming to life will be a welcome sight because honestly, they don't have a shot in this series, regardless of Kristaps Porzingis' status, unless Kyrie Irving is able to be Kyrie Irving to some degree.
Right. And we'll talk more about his assists in a second. But yeah, it is interesting. Like, Kyrie Irving needs to show up at some capacity. And he is one of the most difficult shot makers in all of basketball. But let's talk more about tonight's game in general. Me and you, we're going to build a 3-leg same game parlay. So the people at home get to, have something to sweat. We'll start with you. You're given 2 legs. I round us out. So basically, I told Jim Turvey the last time we did this, if it loses, it doesn't matter if my pick loses. It's your fault because you give out 2 picks. So why don't you start us out, your first pick for tonight?
The first one I'm going with is the Mavs in the first half on the money line. Right now, that is minus, I think, 142-ish as a single leg, but something along those lines. I played them minus a half a point in the first half before this ended up going to 1.5, which I think the consensus still is around 1.5 too. But just to be safe for the purposes of the parlay, first half money line, I think that this is where you have to bank on them at least showing the effort and the fire that you would suspect down 2-0 at home. And part of this is also they can't continue to miss these 3-point shots forever. Like, you would think that the shooting regression or really progression is going to really be in their favor tonight to some degree. And ultimately, I think that they need to increase their 3-point diet. This is a big part of why I don't like how they played in this series. They're not getting the 3-point shots that they've been generating throughout the playoffs at various points. And really, their 3-point volume, I say it all the time, their 3-point attempt rate during the regular season in the NBA was second only to Boston. And in the playoffs, it was still above 40%. In this series, it's in the 30s, and that needs to increase for them to have a chance. So I think that's going to be a point of emphasis tonight. And I do suspect that Dallas is going to jack more threes.
Right. And we keep talking about Porzingis and his status. That will ultimately also play a role because if he's not there, Dallas will definitely have more ability to attack the rim, which also leads itself to possibly some more threes. And you figure at some point, especially with this being the Super Bowl for them, that they show up and they come out to a hot start. So I like that one to start us off. I'll compliment your first half money line with a Kyrie Irving prop. We talked how his over points is one of the most bet props. Well, I'm going to take over 5.5 assists. It's the third time this series I've taken Kyrie over's assists. I'm right there with you, hand in hand, that I think if Kyrie Irving and the Mavs are going to take this one down, he's got to be a facilitator because he is a great shot creator, but he is also getting defended by Jrue Holiday and Derek White. And at a certain point, he's creating a lot of assists. We saw in game 2, 14 potential assists. Dallas just didn't make the threes. And at a certain point, they're going to have to make their shots. Now, I think this 5.5 number, getting some plus money in here works great. Luka Doncic can't do it all. We saw he was tired by the end of it all. He can't go for a triple-double and have Kyrie Irving score 15 points and not have, 6 to 8 assists to show for it. So ultimately, I just think this is a great regression spot for Dallas, as we've talked about plenty so far already. that also comes with the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands almost every single possession, him or Luka Doncic. So I like his assists over to give us that second leg. It's a plus money play. So that Mavs first half money line, Kyrie Irving over 5.5 assists. Take us home. You're going to a Boston Celtic prop.
Yes, and you saw this on the graphic early on. One of the most bet plays today is Drew Holiday over 10.5 rebounds and assists, and damn near everyone here at Action Network has this over for tonight. So we're going to throw that in there because I do like this one as well. And listen, people are backing this for good reason. Drew Holiday is over 10.5 rebounds and assists 6 straight games leading up to this, 8 of his last 9 in the postseason. He's likely to play 40-ish minutes. If you suspect this is going to be a close game, then Drew Holiday is almost definitely going to play 40+ minutes, unless he gets into foul trouble, which he has not had to deal with at all in this series. And he's averaging about 10 rebounds per game in the finals so far. So he's at 9.5 there. So you're suspecting that he's going to have another good rebound performance. We'll see what happens in terms of like how this game ends up shaping out. But I do think that Drew Holiday is one of the guys that is pretty like he's somebody who can get this regardless of who's out there, how the game flow is, as long as it's not a blowout. And I don't suspect that we're going to see a blowout at the very least.
And I think, he should have gotten more assists last game too. You look at potentials versus actuals. I'm pretty sure it was almost 3-1 potential to an actual assist for Drew Holiday. He just does so many things right. It's truly incredible to watch. And I made the joke, I think, to Matt Moore earlier in the week. Drew Holiday should just, sign 1-year deals, go to a veteran team and win as many championships as possible and try and collect like Thanos every single ring, because he did it in Milwaukee. He's likely going to do it again in Boston tonight. And we'll see, or not tonight, this series, and we'll see, what's next for him. But Brian Fonseca, thank you so much for the same game parlay. Best of luck tonight, and let's catch this one, all right?
Absolutely, anytime. We got good odds on this one too, so
yes, sir. And just a reminder of those odds, nearly 6-1. Brian Fonseca giving out Mavericks first half, looking for the Mavs to start out hot. I paired that with Kyrie Irving, a little plus money on over 5.5 assists. Can Kyrie right the track? And then Drew Holiday. We don't care that it's one of the most bet props of the day. Over 10.5 rebounds, assists. Those 3 legs together, again, nearly 6-1 odds for same game parlay. Over to the pucks, and here's how the first 2 games have shaken out between the Oilers and Panthers. Edmonton returning to home ice after 2 straight losses. They have scored just 1 goal on 51 total shots. Florida finding both offensive and defensive success this series behind Sergei Bobrovsky in net. The odds are stacked against the Oilers as we welcome in Nick Martin to talk more about this series in general. Nick, we were talking about this. Both of us have Edmonton futures, and Florida is now minus 490 to win the series. But obviously, they always say the series doesn't get real until you lose on home ice. That's kind of where we're at right now. Edmonton plus 400. But you think, at least the trends say, that you shouldn't fully give up on this Edmonton ticket that we have long term.
Yeah, I mean, this series has got me in shambles, Charlie. I had the Oilers outright, Barkov, Conn Smythe. Really liked my chances of getting something out of this series. Now, after going 0-2 on the series picks too, it's not good. But trying to stay positive. The Oilers are 6-3 on home ice. Okay, so maybe that counteracts a little bit how good road teams have done this year. They're 44-39, so bit of a concern there. One really strong trend that we've seen in the NHL is when teams lose 2 straight in the final, and they're a favorite in the next game, those teams are 18-2. So when odds makers say they like a team in this spot, it's been a pretty serious trend. I'm not the type to weight that too much, but it did apply to the Panthers last year, actually, too, in a series where they got kind of dummied. They lost the first 2 in Vegas and came home and won game 3, which was the only game they won in that series. So there's some things to point to. I think from a more logical standpoint, you can say, obviously, game 1 could have gone better for the Oilers. I think they're capable of playing close to 50-50 hockey at even strength with the Panthers. And I think the thing everyone kind of knows is going to need to break through is the power play. So I do think that's a big positive that you can point to, because the power play has been really close. They hit a couple of posts in a tied game last game. I don't think the Oilers deserve to win game 2. I think that was fairly clear. They got what was arguably even a fairly soft goal by Bobrovsky's standards from Ekholm, and then kind of just got outplayed the rest of the way at even strength. So I think on home ice here, it's reasonable to say that they could bounce back and control a little more of the play at even strength. I think they can get some favorable matchups for their McDavid line and Ekholm Bouchard pairing, given that they'll have last change, which means that they can try to pick spots to not have them out against Barkov's line and Gustav Forslings's defensive pairing. So I think there's some arguments in their favor. I kind of feel like they're going to get right and find one here, but it does feel like that's like all those arguments are pretty well compensated by the minus 130, minus 135 numbers, right? So
Right.
it feels like a lot of respect when you obviously know that the Oilers do need to be a lot better. So I'm not sure if people want to bet into all that. I'm a little afraid. I want to see a series for various reasons, and I would love to see, Barkov win the Conn Smythe or the Oilers win the series. So I need to see some things change, basically. But I think that they could. I think it's going to be a really good game. I feel like if they can get this one, they can make it a series. And then the other, I think, important note that we have to throw out, it really sounds like Barkov is going to play, which is
Right.
great news. I don't think anyone wanted to see it go down where he goes out and then the Oilers stage the comeback. So let's see if they can beat them with Barkov in the mix because he's been excellent. And if they are to lose, I hope he dominates because he's got to get those Conn Smythe tickets home for us.
Listen, when you're staring down the barrel of a gun, you got to double down on it. And that's exactly what I did with the Oilers. I grabbed them right when they opened at minus 125. That number has jumped up, minus 135 at most markets, minus 130 at FanDuel right now. It really does feel, though, like they missed that game one chance. And I think game two was a little bit more expected speed. Florida's defense really making, a number on Edmonton. But again, you mentioned plenty of power play opportunities, plenty of posts that were so close. You look at this game tomorrow night, it's 8 p.m. puck drop. Edmonton, obviously the favorites, and they've taken in some money since open. It feels like the must-win tax is there, and that's what you kind of said. You're staying away from a side and a total in this matchup, but there is a certain player that you like to find the back of the net.
Yeah, there is. And I'll throw one more thing out there quick. The Oilers do have experience in these kind of spots. I'm pretty sure I remember you betting them versus Dallas down 2-1. And versus Vancouver, they had to rattle off two straight. They played really good in all those games. So I think there's been moments you can point to from this run where people really were writing them off and they found a way to put together a really good effort. So that's another positive to point to. And I was kind of split between two goal scorers. I played them both last game because I like the looks that they've been getting on the power play. And I think that the way that the Panthers are going to continue trying to kill is going to leave them open. I like Bouchard the most now because the numbers have moved. He's at plus 440 and just continues to get a ton of shots on goal. He's been scoring at a rate all postseason long that makes this a profitable number. And I've thought through the first two games of this series, nothing has looked different enough that I don't want to just keep playing it. It feels like he continues to get these open one-timers. He's out there so much with McDavid in the offensive zone and just always getting pucks laid off to him. He's really good at getting accurate shots through and usually really good at missing the first one or two blockers. So he was close. He hit the post for us last game on a really good look on the power play. I think that this number is just still a little too long, and we're going to see ridiculous minutes from the Oilers' top dogs, and him in particular. The one, like that unit's already been taxed about as much as they possibly can, him and Ekholm. But with Nurse out, if Nurse is out or quite hurt, as bad as Nurse has been, I still think he's a lot better than Cody Ceci. I still think you have to want him in there if you're an Oilers fan. But with that said, he looked very injured at the end of game 3 or at the end of game 2. He was really trying to play in the third period and couldn't. He kept trying to take little laps in between during commercial breaks and stuff. It doesn't look good. So I think even more than ever, we're going to see Bouchard and Ekholm take on a ton of minutes. They're going to try to help pad those minutes by putting them out in offensive zone starts with the top two lines. So I think this is a good spot to take Bouchard. I don't want to lay a big bet on a side or a total in this game. I really don't. I think maybe some people are going to go with the trends and, get the courage together to play the Oilers.
Like me.
But yeah, I don't hate it. Like I could see it being one of those things where it just goes and then I'm like, oh, wow, I stayed off it just because I didn't think it was a great number. But yeah, I think that's a good worthy sprinkle that's kind of worked out well for us all postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I consistently remember you throwing Bouchard in the app, and there was that stretch that he had where he was finding the back in the net nonstop, and the minutes make sense, right? Like we talked about it before with the Oilers in the past. They're going to play their big dogs a lot of minutes. We thought they might have ran out of gas, a couple series ago, and they continue to kind of put past that notion. And we'll see with game 3, but this is definitely plus 440. Evan Bouchard, a great look. And, I'm hoping for it because that means that Edmonton's scoring and finding the back of the net. But Nick Martin, thank you so much. Best of luck tomorrow and enjoy the hockey.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Enjoy the game.
Over to the diamond, and we've got plenty of afternoon baseball in play today, one of which gets underway just shortly here with Houston and the Giants having first pitch at 3:45 p.m. Eastern. San Fran, the slight favorites with Logan Webb on the mound, garnering 72% of the handle. But if you want some late night baseball as well, the Angels and Diamondbacks square off at 9:40 Eastern. Again, the favorites. The Arizona Diamondbacks are getting 78% of the handle, with Slade Cecconi taking the mound against the lowly Angels. Keeping that in mind, we welcome in Sean Zerillo to talk more about the baseball slate today. Sean, I'm not going to waste any time. You have a best bet in Houston, San Fran. That's getting underway just shortly. Tell me what your best bet is here.
Yeah, the San Francisco Giants, they really hit left-handed pitching quite well. It is the one strength they show offensively. They're much closer to league average against right-handed pitching. And if this team is going to be taken seriously from a wild card perspective, I would expect them to go out and add some left-handed bats before the deadline. But in terms of facing southpaw pitching on the season, they are 8th in WRC plus. And over the last 30 days, they're actually 2nd with a 151 WRC plus against southpaw pitching. So been hitting really well against lefties, getting Framber Valdez today, throwing Logan Webb on their side of the mound. And Webb's strikeout minus walk rate was down earlier in the season. He wasn't generating the strikeouts like he typically does. The ground ball rate is where it typically is, which is one of the highest in baseball. We'll talk about that more in a second, but his hard hit rate is very high this year. His expected ERA is in the 4s, but seeing his strikeout minus walk rate and the strikeouts come back over the last 6 weeks or so, the pitch modeling metrics aligning with his career average gives me less concern than it initially did regarding that batted ball profile and the fact that the strikeouts were down early. But Webb getting back to his regular expected results, and looking at the projection systems, they have about a half of a run separating Logan Webb and Framber Valdez. I'm closer to 2/10 of a run. I'm a little bit lower on Webb relative to the market just because I do want to factor in those early season results to a degree. But in terms of the way the lineups rank out, I think the Astros lineup just gets very shallow after your number 3 hitter, Jeremy Pena in the 4-hole. Kyle Tucker currently out. Yadier Dier is dealing with an injury. Don't have the Astros lineup at the time of recording for today, but Yadier Diaz, I would expect not to be in there after missing last night and then getting the day game again today. Would probably expect him to take one more day off. So that Astros lineup, the 5 through 9 spots, really shallow. Even Jeremy Pena being in the 4-hole, not a lot of punch compared to what they're previously putting in there. So Giants have the offensive advantage. I think Logan Webb is the slightly better pitcher, and I give them a slight bullpen advantage as well. So I made the Giants about minus 120 in this matchup. Minus 125, would bet them up to minus 120. And the last comment I want to make, just regards to the total, park factor typically a bit higher at Oracle Park during the day as opposed to at night. The ball carries a little bit more during the day, and the wind is blowing out pretty aggressively here, 12 miles an hour to left field. So I do make this total closer to 7.5, but no bet for me on the over at 7 minus 120. As I mentioned with Webb, one of the highest ground ball rates in baseball. Framber Valdez, the highest rate in baseball amongst qualified starters. Both of these guys should keep the ball on the ground and avoid those fly balls getting carried out by the wind. So don't like the over in this matchup, even though that's where I'd lean. Do like the Giants to about minus 120.
Yeah, we talked about the Astros plenty of times on this show about, do they have some value in the division long market? The pitching injuries have been stacking up, and now, having Kyle Tucker on the injured list, Yadier Diaz possibly also banged up, it's just adding up for them. And you mentioned, I was looking at this game and seeing Logan Webb and Valdez, the amount of average exit velocity and hard hits they give up is so high, but then you look at how much ground balls they generate, just being able to mitigate damage. It's really scary to take an over when it comes to those two guys. But the other game that you're focusing on, I mentioned earlier, the 9:40 first pitch, Jose Soriano against Slade Cecconi, the D-backs favored right around the minus 140, 145 number, and you like the favorites to roll here at home.
I do. The Diamondbacks have a huge base running and defensive advantage in this series. They're top 10 on the season. They rank about 9th in both categories, 7th in defensive and in defensive value. The Angels are 29th by both categories. And looking at the past 30-day offensive splits, it's a very similar differential. Arizona 8th, the Angels 26th over the last 30 days against right-handed pitching. One more category I want to mention, bullpens. Last 30 days, Angels 30th in expected FIP, 30th in strikeout minus walk rate. Now, the Diamondbacks are not much better. They're 26th in both categories. The differential on the season, pretty similar as well. The Diamondbacks have had a top 5 bullpen by all 3 of those data points: strikeout minus walk rate, expected FIP, stuff plus on the season. The Angels are a little bit lower than them, but over the last 30 days, the gap has grown, and the Diamondbacks have moved closer to a top 10 or an above average bullpen, where the Angels have remained a bottom 3, bottom 2 bullpen. So I think across the board, defense, base running, bullpens, the Diamondbacks have the advantage in this matchup. Soriano might project as a better pitcher than Slade Cecconi, but I think Cecconi has pretty substantial upside. Like Ryan Nelson, he's another guy in this Diamondbacks rotation who shows really encouraging pitch modeling metrics, just doesn't have the results necessarily to match it as of yet, but a career 4.6% walk rate, so he has good command. He has 3 average or above average pitches: his slider, his curveball, his changeup, all 100 or better on Stuff Plus ratings. Has a below average fastball, and he throws that about 55% of the time. So I'm curious to see if Cecconi at some point pulls back on that fastball usage, maybe increases his usage of his secondary stuff. But that said, a 104 pitching plus rating, has the upside in his profile. Career 4.8 expected FIP. His expected ERA this year in the lower 4s, like 4.2, 4.3. So I expect him to pitch toward that level the rest of the way. I think he can beat his projections. I think he can pitch to an ERA of around 4.25, 4.3 the remainder of the season, given those above average pitch modeling metrics. And as he continues to alter his profile and show above average command. So like Slade Cecconi, Soriano's an interesting pitcher as well. Bit Jekyll and Hyde, but does have really good strikeout stuff. But as I said, across the board, base running, defense, bullpen, that's where the big advantages lie for Arizona in this matchup. And their offense is hitting a little bit better in June, partially because Corbin Carroll is finally hitting 140 WRC plus in June for Carroll. Still not hitting for power, but is using his speed to get on base and putting the ball in play, avoiding the strikeout. So he was at a 133 last season. He really struggled in April and May, was at 74 and 63 WRC plus in those months. Back up to 140 this month. Seems like Corbin Carroll may finally be finding it, and curious to see how the rest of his season goes.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. The D-backs, they're such a pesky team last year, so annoying on the base paths. They manufacture runs, and that's what they do at an elite rate. And Slade Cecconi, you mentioned, an expected ERA over a run lower than actual. So hopefully some positive regression coming for Sean Zarillo. But thank you, Sean. Enjoy the rest of the baseball and enjoy some afternoon baseball.
Thank you very much. Go Snakes.
And just a reminder that any pick we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app at that handle, Green Dot Daily. We keep track so you don't have to. And that's going to be all for Green Dot Daily on this Wednesday. We'll be back here tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. And just a programming note, coming up in just a little over an hour, Action Island for Game 3 between the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks. Come see what Gilles Gallant, Jim Turvey, Grant Niefer, and Maria Marino are cooking up for a same game parlay. Y'all have a great rest of your day.